We are honored to be joined by the new head coach at Nebraska, Matt Rhule. You know him, you love him from Temple, from Baylor, from the Carolina Panthers. Coach, welcome.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, our pleasure. Our pleasure. So, Max and I were talking about this before we got on with you, Matt. You left Baylor, and it wasn't that long ago, and you come back at Nebraska to what feels like a completely different sport. How different was college football when you left to when you got back?
You guys hit it on the head. I mean, it's significantly different. The transfer portal obviously has changed things. NIL has changed things. Conference realignment continues to change things. We're talking about future schedules, and we're looking at time zones and playing in 3 different time zones. So it's just it's significantly different. It's part of the new landscape.
So, what did you learn as an NFL head coach that you wouldn't have known had you never been an NFL head coach? What do you bring back from that experience?
I think a much more complete understanding of the draft process. I think a lot of people watch the combine and think it's that, and after sitting there's so much more to it. I think understanding the economics of the game. People talk a lot about the head coach and general manager. What I learned was that league's really about your salary cap person. It's really it's a financial league as much as anything. And so, even in my last year, I'm on the hot seat going into my last season, and for one reason or another, just from a financial perspective, you let Hassan Reddick go, you let Stephon Gilmore go. Those are 2 of the best players in the game. And so that's not like, we don't recognize what type of players they are. It's just hey, we're going to save money and try to go get this guy, or hey, we're going to save money for this next year. So it's really much more of a financial league than anything else. And obviously college football has become a little more financial now with NIL, but just hopefully I can help our players understand better what the next level will be like.
I heard you talking about that with regard to your receivers, where you're saying they got to learn to play everywhere. They got to play on every special team, because the NFL, on most teams, it's about 2 guys at receiver, and then everybody else better find a way to fit in.
Yeah, you come up, you're a highly rated receiver, you're all state. You go to all these camps, you catch balls, you do cones, you go see your wide receiver trainer, you do all this work, you come to college, and then you go to the NFL, and you're at best as a rookie, unless you're like a top 10 pick, top 15 pick, you're like receiver number 2 or receiver number 3 or 4 or 5. And so some teams go into game day with 4 receivers, some guys go in with 5. So 3, 4, and 5 better have a couple things. They better, number 1, be able to stay healthy and practice. Wide receiver number 1, if he's a little tight on Wednesday, we can give him the day off. But if you're number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, one of those guys that's fighting to be eligible, be on the roster, you better be able to practice and be healthy. You better know all the different positions. Like, I can fill in here, I can fill in there, I can do this. And then 3, you better be a teamer, man. And guys think, I'm coach, I play special teams, I return kicks. I'm not talking about being a returner. I'm talking about covering kickoffs and playing on the punt team. And so I think that knowledge, from not from me, maybe from our assistant coaches, is going to help our guys.
Has that been refreshing, Matt, to get back to the college level of like really working individually with the kid, and it's not the grown up on the contract? Like, just how has that connection been coming back to this versus maybe what that NFL experience is like?
Well, let's say this. I loved a lot of the guys I worked with in the NFL, but to your point, it's very transactional. If I struggled in the NFL with anything, it was the concept of cutting a player. So I'm going to coach you and build a relationship with you, and then one day walk in and be like, hey, thanks for everything. It's time to go. And, you see these guys like they're fighting for their lives, man. It's like, sometimes you have to do it to a guy like every other week because, you're playing the roster game. So it's just so transactional. Whereas here, we want them to be successful in football, but more importantly, we want them to be great people. We want them to get a great education. So we're involved in so many aspects of their life that I think it has a real has a real different feel, much more personal feel. And that's really kind of who I think I am, who I think our staff is more than anything else.
I'm guessing that you just get a lot of energy from being back in this. I'm curious, like, obviously you dabbled in TV last November, you went on a vacation. I mean, after a stressful finish there, like, I'm sure it was probably a little bit tempting to like really take some time off. Like, how did how did you kind of process that, like, kind of crossroads?
I think for me, it was just about making sure I found the right job and the right fit for me, the right fit for my family, a place where we could go and be happy. It's sometimes funny, when you're a coach, if you're not having success, there's so much vitriol, cast your way. And it's like, hey, I'm sorry it's not working out, but it's not for a lack of trying, so I'm going to go somewhere that was going to be nice to my kids, going to be nice to me, not really me, but nice to my kids, nice to my wife, where I could raise my family in a happy place. So yeah, there was certainly some thought of like, hey, there was some time there. I had a duty and a responsibility of the Panthers to try to find a job. So I certainly, obviously, by taking a job, I proved that I tried to do that. But I missed coaching, Max. I mixed. I think you've seen me at practice. I mean, you see me around. I mean, I'm happy. I'm flying around because this is what I love to do. And so my wife laughed. She was like, "Yeah, you think you're gonna not coach next year? Like, I wish you could spend a year hanging out, But she knows the way I'm wired, and I like this, and I like this, these relationships, and I like this process. So I've been really happy doing it.
Well, now I'm even more impressed with your TV stint on Good Morning Football, because I watched that the first day you were on it. I think I texted your agent and I said, well, I guess he's not coaching this year because he looks like he's getting hired here.
I had a lot of fun doing that. And, over the years in this job, you do a lot of media. I've been on College Game Day, I think 3 times. I've been on that. And so, I certainly am not the best looking guy in the world. So I'm certainly not as good looking as you two guys. There shouldn't be too many cameras around me, but yeah, I just think, I went and did that and had a really cool experience. I did something on CBS and had some other things lined up. And, just Nebraska was the right fit. It was the right place. It was the right people. And I remember way back when Max told me he was moving to Lincoln, and I was like, oh, what's there? And my wife and I came here and expected like a kind of a 1-horse town, right? And you get here and there's a city, and then you drive down the road and then there's another city, and really cool people and cool restaurants, and there's society, and then there's art and music and shows. And so I couldn't be happier that we did it.
So how different or similar is this to year one at Temple or year one at Baylor?
I think it's significantly different. And, when I took over at Temple, I had been an assistant coach there the year before, so I knew all the players. But what we were doing was we were leaving that sort of that world of the MAC, and they had just gone into the Big East. I missed that first year in the Big East, but then that next year when I came in, it was the American. And so we had recruited a lot of kids to the MAC. And so there had to be an infusion of talent. We had to focus on recruiting and on development to catch up to the Cincinnatis and the Central Floridas and all those teams. So that, that first year, we started playing all the young guys about game 3-4, and, we're 1-10 and won our last game to finish on a high note at 2-10. Go to Baylor, and obviously they just had a scandal. A ton of stuff's happened. Some of their best players, off of 7 and 16 went, left early for the draft. And so we were trying to build it from there, So that year, I remember, I think I had like 4 maybe scholarship O-linemen. I moved 2 tight ends to the O-line. We lost to Oklahoma the 3rd game of the year by a touchdown, like 48-42 or something like that. We had the ball at the end, and we had, a 280 and a 275-pound offensive lineman playing in the game. So it was just a weird situation, right? So we went 1-11 that year. We lost to TCU, who was a top 10 team, the last game of the year. And the minute the last horn sounded, I remember Chris Del Conte walked over and said, hey, you guys would be great in the long run. I remember walking out and saying to myself, we will never be this bad again. And the next year was 7 and 6. And obviously, 11 wins the 3rd year. So, but those first 2 years was a new conference. It's coming off. This is a bunch of guys who've been through a lot. They beat Iowa to end the year this year, a great Iowa team. These guys have battled. I think they're pretty bought into what we're doing. So I'm excited to work with this group. I think, we are where we were at those other places in year 2. We're there right now.
So what is the thing you feel like you're attacking, especially like this spring and this first offseason? Is it, especially when you are inheriting a group that has had a lot of different coaches and they've endured, a lot of losing over these past 4 or 5 years? Like, kind of is it the habits? Is it, what is the quote unquote kind of winning culture stuff you feel like you have to inject into this?
I think everyone has their way of doing things, like their process, for lack of a better term. And so I think the thing for us was we wanted to make sure that we spent this whole year teaching our process and having the guys all learn it, right? I have a new defensive coordinator in Tony White, never worked with him before. Some new coaches, new staff. And the way we do things is a little different, right? No two practices are ever the same. So there's just kind of some like anxiety at times that can come like, oh, what are we doing today? Or so from when we changed everything. So from the way that we eat to the way that we train, to the way that we do the training room recovery, academic structure, study hall structure, practice, everything's different. Doesn't mean it's better and it doesn't mean it's worse. It just is what it is. It's just the way that we do it. And so that first year, that learning process is so hard for the guys, and I feel for them. And so we just said, hey, listen, we're going to explain why. We're going to do it. We'll be patient with the hope of when we get to the season, everyone's bought into it, understands it. And, we say with our process, like first you learn it, then you start to live it. And eventually you kind of defend it. Like when you see someone not doing the right thing, it irks you. We want to get to that second stage where everyone knows what's expected and they live it out day in and day out. So, whereas when I was younger, I was much more like, how could you? Now I'm much more patient and just trying to teach so that guys understand, hey, this is why we do what we do. And it's not Coach Rhule's way, it's our way.
When you're walking around in Lincoln, I know people are coming up to you. What is like the number one thing that you always hear or they're always asking you?
Either they'll say, hey, welcome to Nebraska or thanks for coming. I'm always struck by the passion, like you went to I forget what it was, a women's basketball game or a men's basketball game. And my daughters, we went over to the 402 Creamery and we're getting ice cream. This guy said, hey, can I take a picture with you, Coach? We took a picture. I said, where are you from? And they were from like 4 hours away. And they had just driven in for the game. We're getting some ice cream and they were going to drive back 4 hours. And man, I was, I had to walk 5 minutes from my apartment in the Haymarket to the stadium. I was like, this really means something to people. And so I try to do a good job of taking time when people stop me to not just take a picture, but to talk to people because I recognize what that end up there means to everyone in the state. And, but yeah, I get that a lot. No one ever says, Coach, can I get a picture with you? Because I want one. They always say my brother will love it. My dad will love it. So I try to take pictures with people if they ask. But yeah.
Do people do autographs anymore or is it's just all selfies now?
Very rarely, man. I think I've probably signed not when someone says, can I have a signed ball, but someone handed me something maybe 4 or 5 times. Mm-hmm. I had a little kid the other day stop me. They do these tours and they come through. It's one of the things about Nebraska. They tour the stadium. And I had this group stop me and they said, this kid was like, Coach, will you sign my water bottle? And I was like, I don't know if a water bottle will work. I was like, so we did something else. I signed it for him. He looked at me afterwards. He's like, LSU. Like, go Tigers, man.
So when you got to Baylor, that was immersing yourself into a new culture. You'd not worked in Texas. You hadn't recruited in Texas. You go out and hire people like Joey McGuire who understand the state. Here, it seems like you guys have done a really good job trying to figure out what makes everybody tick there. The story about Ed Foley going around to all the high schools in Nebraska and then going and visiting Sam Foltz's parents. Like that's how you get to know people. I mean, how do you feel your handle on Nebraska culture? What makes the recruiting and the football culture in the state tick? How do you feel you are right now with that?
We're trying to figure it out. And I think the important thing to note is it doesn't come from a place of, hey, we have to do X, Y, and Z. It comes from a place of, we like people. And if you hire a bunch of people who care about other people, then they listen. Half of life is just shutting up and listening. And so, you see behind me, I have a picture of Coach Osborne sitting there with me. He spoke at our clinic a couple weeks ago. And, Coach has been in, Coach Solis, talking to all these people who know a ton about the University of Nebraska and its history. Because to me, I talk about, hey, we like to have our own process, the way we do things. But Coach Osborne, Coach Solich, Coach Devaney before them for 42 years, this was amongst the top, if not the top, dominant program in college football. And they had a blueprint and a way for doing it. So to me, it's like, we have to do things our way. We have to paint the walls the color that we think looks appropriate. We have to put the right furniture in. But if there's a blueprint that works, man, we'd be pretty stupid not to at least ask about it. And so when it comes to recruiting, we want to find guys 6 to 8 guys who are dying to be on this team from the state every year. If there's 10, great. If there's 12, great. And how do you do that? You go out and you find those guys. When you've worked at Temple and you've worked at Baylor, recruiting is not about just, looking at the rivals on 247 list and sending out a bunch of offers. It's about working. And so coming to a place that has way more credibility, we want to still have that same approach of just, we're grinding and working and talking to people.
And walk-ons with that public school tuition versus those private schools you used to work with, you can really get some walk-ons now.
So there's no better place to be a walk-on than the University of Nebraska.
Matt, you mentioned it, but after working with Phil Snow for a decade, like what was it like going out and trying to find a DC and also just like trying to find what you felt like made sense for the Big Ten?
Yeah, Phil's my mentor. I've never won a game as a head coach without Phil. I was sad when I got fired. They fired Phil for whatever reason. We had top 5 defense in the NFL. I think he's brilliant, and the game misses him right now. I believe that. And so, I have a bunch of young coaches on my staff who were trained by Phil and raised by Phil. And so, I started looking at like, what should we do? Talk to some other guys who've worked with us. But I've known Tony White a long time. When I went to be a GA at UCLA, Tony was just finishing up as a player, had been around. He and I stayed in contact, stayed in touch, really respected the things that he's done. And, to me, it's not about X's and O's, Max. Like we were a 4-3 at Temple. We were a 3-3 at Baylor. We were a 4-3 that morphed into like a 5-2, 5-1 in the NFL. It's about getting your best players on the field. And so as I talked to Tony, I felt like he did that, right? He had been at places that were offensive places. He had been at, worked for Rocky. So he'd been with the defensive coach. He'd been at different processes, but he always played good defense. He always finds a way to be aggressive, and he was very multiple. And so when you're multiple, you can respond to what the other teams are doing. So I don't want to be like everyone else. I want to be a little bit different. I want to be the team that you have to prepare for a little bit ahead of time. You come in on Tuesday and the kids are like on the other team are like, hey, how are we blocking this front? What are we doing there? So Tony gave me all that, plus someone that I trust and know a little bit.
Well, and that's what Nebraska was offensively for decades, was that team you had to prepare for quite a bit extra. How much of an advantage is that when you do something pretty different from everybody else?
I think it's significantly different. I think there's a schematic advantage sometimes. Like when Malcolm Gladwell wrote the book, Goliath. Like when you are David, when you're the underdog. And I'm not saying we're underdogs, but it's just a mentality that I like to have. When you do something that's counter to what everyone else is doing. So everyone else is going tempo. Let's slow it down. Everyone else is slowing it down. Let's go tempo. Let's just be the team that people have to get ready for. Everyone else is playing one personnel grouping. Let's play 15. I think part of it's adapting, Andy, to your environment. Like when you talk to Coach Osborne, he was a passing game guy to begin with, was a quarterback, right? But the weather here, especially before the stadium was closed in, the wind, he adapted. He figured out, he said, hey, how do I win here? And we were at Temple, we were a 2-back power offense. Went to Baylor, we were a 3 and 4 wide spread offense. We still believe in the same principles. But I think for me, it's about finding those things and doing something that maybe other people aren't doing so that you have maybe a little bit of a schematic advantage sometimes.
And you got Coach Solis texting you during the Fiesta Bowl going, hey, see, fullbacks still work.
There's no doubt. Yeah, I have so much respect for Coach. When I was the offensive coordinator at Temple, he was the head coach at Ohio, so I had a chance to go against him. And we played, I think, twice. We played for the MAC East Championship. We had great teams, but he always had his guys ready to go when it mattered. And he morphed and changed as time came along. That, to me, is the mark of a great coach. You've had success, and yet you're not afraid to change. So I've had some really cool conversations. But, yes, he definitely believes in the art of the fullback.
Those guys are not on the 24/7 rankings, though. Like, I don't know where you find a fullback now.
We're doing a fullback camp this summer. We're doing one. So everyone has
right.
We're doing a 1-day fullback camp. And with my thought process was there's probably guys out there that play tight end. There's probably guys out there that are big tailbacks. There's probably guys in the wing tee that are fullbacks in other places across the country. Linebackers. They can come here for 1 day and just focus on one position, play fullback. If we can find a couple of them, when you have a good one, when you watch the 49ers, the versatility of Jusic, like when you have a good one or a versatile one, they can add so much to your offense. People don't see it very often. So we'd love to find one. We had a great one, Nick Sharga at Temple. He used to just demolish people. So I'd love to find that type of a kid here at Nebraska.
That's more of a mentality than anything else, though, because that person, that body type, there's other positions they can play. But it feels like when you meet the fullback, you've met the fullback.
That's right. Hey, I still picture like the old broken.
Oh,
ring.
yeah.
Yes.
Right
Well,
there.
Yeah.
back in the day, they always had the red stripe across the bridge of their nose because
Yes,
that's where the helmet hit them in practice.
That's right. Yeah, no, it certainly takes a special someone. And that fullback camp, I don't think it's padded. I think it'll be in t-shirt and shorts. So I don't know if you can really show your true fullbackdom, but I think it's pretty cool. And again, to your point, it gives you an identity as a team when you can always line up and do that.